My name is Daniel Whitfield. I'm 58 years old. I live in Sarasota, Florida, in a waterfront neighborhood called Siesta Cove. The machine said I was unconscious. My family said they wished I wouldn't wake up. They were wrong on both counts, and that one mistake cost them everything they thought they were about to inherit. If you enjoy true-to-life family stories with justice served at the end, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because this story is going to take you somewhere, and I promise you won't see the ending coming. My own family certainly didn't. But let me start at the beginning, back when I still believed I knew the people sleeping under my roof. We had a 4-bedroom house on Bayshore Court, backing onto a quiet saltwater canal, where herons stood motionless at dusk like patient old men. Nice house. The kind of house you point at when you're 26 and broke and say, someday. I built a mid-sized logistics company, Whitfield Freight Solutions, out of a 400-square-foot office on Tamiami Trail back in 2001. By 2024, we had 47 employees, 3 warehouse contracts, and a revenue number that made my accountant smile every single quarter. I say have like it's the present tense. We'll get to that. My wife, Renee, 54, had been with me for 32 years. We'd been married for 30. My son, Bryce, 28, worked loosely in the business, and I do mean loosely. His job description, as far as I could ever tell, consisted of forwarding emails and attending the Christmas party. My daughter, Paige, 25, lived 20 minutes away in Gulf Gate and called me every other Sunday, usually when she needed something. And then there was Dean Alvarez, 35. Renee had gotten pregnant at 19 by a high school boyfriend, a man named Alvarez who never married her, never held a job for longer than a season, and never paid a dime toward his son's life. He hovered around the edges of Dean's childhood the way a stray dog hovers around a barbecue, close enough to smell it, never invited to the table. Renee had sole legal custody. When I met her, she was a 22-year-old single mother trying to raise a 4-year-old boy alone on a waitress's paycheck, and I fell head over heels. We were young, broke, and desperately in love. We married 2 years later, right around the same time I was risking everything I had, which was nothing, plus a loan, to start Whitfield Freight Solutions. I raised Dean from the time he was 6, treated him like my own flesh and blood. Because his biological father was still alive and still legally in the picture, we never did the formal adoption paperwork. He kept his last name, but I eventually made him my vice president of operations, and I trusted that man with everything. I mean that literally. Hold on to that word, everything, because it's going to matter. It was a Tuesday in late August when my life split into before and after. I'd had a long meeting at the office. Our Tamiami Trail location, 3rd floor, the one with the broken air conditioner I kept telling Bryce to get fixed and he kept not fixing. The kind of small thing that shouldn't matter but somehow always does in hindsight. I left around 9:40 p.m. I remember checking my phone at a red light on US 41. Renee had texted, "Dinner's in the fridge," 4 words. I remember thinking that was nice. The last thing I remember after that is the light turning green, my foot easing off the brake, the intersection opening up in front of me, and then nothing. A pickup truck ran the red doing about 55, hit the driver's side dead on. The paramedics said I was lucky to be alive. They said my seatbelt saved me. They said a lot of things I wasn't awake to hear. I woke up, partially, 3 days later. And God help me, I wish I hadn't. Here's the thing about certain kinds of coma that nobody tells you. It's not like sleep. It's like being locked in a room with no light and no door. You can hear everything, voices, footsteps, the metronome beeping of the machines, the squeak of a nurse's shoes on linoleum. You can hear almost everything happening around you, but you can't open your eyes, you can't lift a finger, you can't make a sound. You are simply there, sealed inside your own body, listening. Sarasota Memorial Hospital. Intensive care unit, 3rd floor. I know because I heard a nurse say it into a phone. The first voices I recognized belonged to a doctor and to Renee. Day 3, I think. Mid-morning, judging by how loud the hallway traffic was. "Mr. Whitfield is stable," the doctor said. "His brain activity is improving. We're cautiously optimistic, but he could remain unconscious for another week. Possibly 2. We'll continue monitoring. And if he doesn't improve," Renee asked, "then we'd revisit the conversation about care options." What kind of options? That was Bryce. He was there too. We could look at transferring him to a long-term acute care facility. And depending on how things progress, The family would discuss whether to pursue further aggressive intervention, ventilator support, resuscitation, that kind of thing. There was a pause, and then Renee said it, calm as a woman ordering coffee. He always said he'd hate being kept alive by machines. If it comes to that, if his heart stops, I want to sign whatever order means you don't bring him back. The DNR or whatever it's called. I felt my whole chest cave in. Not physically, somewhere deeper than that. Did she just? He told us himself, Bryce added quickly, almost like he'd rehearsed it, that if anything like this ever happened, he never wanted to be a burden. That's just who Dad is. I never said that, not once in my life. Who talks like that at 58? Who sits their family down and plans for a truck they don't know is coming? He's 58, Renee continued, her voice smooth as a funeral director's. He's lived a full life. He cares so much about everyone else. He wouldn't want us suffering through this. 58 is a full life, she said that. My wife of 30 years looked a physician in the eye and described me the way you'd describe a houseplant that had run its course. Then I heard it, the small, distinct plastic click of a pen cap coming off. She signed the paperwork to begin the DNR process right there at my bedside, 3 feet from my listening ears. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do a single thing except lie there in the dark of my own skull and absorb it. And somewhere in that darkness a thought formed, cold and clear and strangely calm. Don't react, don't move, just listen. That thought probably saved my life more than the seatbelt did. They came back that evening. All 4 of them this time. I heard the door open, heard chair legs scrape across the floor, heard someone crack open a can of soda. I'm almost certain it was Bryce because of course it was. Paige spoke first. He looks the same. He's stable, Renee said. Doctor thinks maybe another week, Paige sighed. Not a sad sigh, an inconvenienced one. I have stuff going on, Mom. I can't keep driving out here every 2 days. Stuff going on. Your father is in the ICU, sweetheart, and you have stuff going on. Nobody's asking you to, Bryce said. Paige stopped, then let it out. He was never there for any of my stuff, so I don't know why I should rearrange my whole life for this. There it was, Renee said softly. Not a rebuke, more like a reflex. I'm serious. Every school play, every graduation thing, he was always working. Always some meeting, some client, some deal. And now we're all supposed to drop everything. Lying there. I'll admit it. She wasn't entirely wrong about the work. I missed things, more than I should have. But I was building something, for them. Every late night on Tamiami Trail, every missed recital was a brick in a wall meant to shelter these exact people. Dean spoke for the first time. His voice was steady, measured, the way it always was in board meetings. He made it clear he didn't want to be a burden to anyone. I think we respect that. Exactly, Bryce said. Then quieter, in a voice he thought was too low to matter. Besides, once the estate clears, the trust starts paying out. I looked at the folder in his study last year. I know what my share is. I'm 28. I've been waiting. Bryce, Renee cut him off. What? I'm just saying, not here. Silence. Once the estate clears, the trust starts paying out. I looked at the folder in his study last year. My son, my 28-year-old son, had been rifling through my private papers and had already penciled my death into his financial calendar, while I lay 3 feet away. To him, I wasn't a father in a hospital bed. I was a line item, a bond approaching its maturity date. I cannot describe what that feels like. I won't insult either of us by trying. Over the next 4 days, I heard things I will never unhear. I heard Bryce on the phone. He stepped just inside the doorway, apparently deciding I was too far gone to matter, telling someone, yeah, he's not waking up. Few more days, probably. Listen, can you look into some properties in Lakewood Ranch? I'll have liquidity soon. Liquidity. His father. Liquidity. I heard Paige tell Renee that the Bayshore courthouse was too big for just one person, and that Mom should really think about downsizing after. Just after, like I was a seasonal event, a hurricane passing through on its way out to sea. And I heard Dean, quiet, efficient Dean, the man I promoted over people with twice his experience, the man I took to Buccaneers games, the man I lent $20,000 in 2019 because family helps family. I heard him tell Renee, and I am quoting him directly, the sooner we settle the estate, the cleaner this is. I can manage the transition at Whitfield Freight. I know where everything is. I bet you do, Dean. I didn't know yet what I meant by that, not fully. But something cold settled into my gut that afternoon and never left. Renee said, let's not rush. Dean said, of course. I just want to be ready. Of course you do. Day 7, late August. Sarasota heat pressing against the hospital windows like a hand. I opened my eyes. The nurse screamed. In a good way, I think. She called for the doctor. There was noise, light, the sudden beautiful chaos of people who hadn't expected to celebrate anything that day. The doctor came in, ran his checks, started asking me questions. What year is it? Who's the president? Can you squeeze my hand? I answered every single one. And when Renee walked through that door 20 minutes later, her face did something complicated. There was relief in it. I want to be fair about this, there genuinely was. But underneath the relief, something else flickered. Something that vanished so fast I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Almost. She hugged me, she cried, she said I was so scared. I held her, and I said, I know, I'm so lucky to have you. Every single word out of my mouth was a lie. And for the first time in 30 years of marriage, I was completely at peace with that. They sent me home the next day. Bryce held the car door open. Paige brought flowers, yellow ones which I've always hated but sure. Dean shook my hand with both of his and said, Welcome back, Dan. We were worried sick. I smiled at every single one of them. Welcome back. Oh, I was back all right, and I had absolutely nothing but time. Stay with me now, because what I found once I started looking was so much worse than anything I heard in that hospital room. And trust me, that bar was already 6 feet underground. There is a specific kind of quiet that settles over a man who knows something nobody knows he knows. I lived inside that quiet for 4 straight weeks. Coming home from Sarasota Memorial felt like walking back onto a stage mid-performance. Everyone knew their lines. Everyone had their marks. And I, the man who was supposed to be dead, had wandered back into a play I was no longer written into. Renee fussed over pillows. Bryce carried my bag inside. Paige had stocked the refrigerator. She had actually gone grocery shopping for me, which in 25 years of her life I could count on 0 hands. Dean stood in the doorway of my own house on Bayshore Court and said, We've got everything handled at the office, Dan. Don't even think about work. Thank you, son, I said, son. The word tasted like ash, but I smiled. I sat down in my own chair. I accepted the soup Renee made, and I began the most important performance of my life. A tired, grateful, slightly foggy 58-year-old man who just wanted to recover. I was none of those things. Week 2, I told everyone I was still dizzy, still getting headaches, still not quite sharp enough for the office. Renee believed it instantly, which told me everything about how closely she'd been paying attention to me these past few years. Bryce nodded sympathetically and went back to whatever Bryce did all day, which as far as I could tell involved a great deal of golf and very little work. Paige checked in by text every 3 days. Dean said, Take all the time you need, Dan. I've got the office. I'm sure you do, Dean. The first call I made was to a lawyer, not our family lawyer. Not Walter Combs down on Main Street, who'd been handling our documents for 15 years and who, I suddenly realized, had probably had lunch with Renee more recently than he'd had lunch with me. No, I needed someone clean. Someone with no threads connecting him to anyone in my house. I found him through a referral from an old college buddy. His name was Gordon Sutter, mid-50s, an office off Fruitville Road, the kind of lawyer who doesn't bother with a fancy waiting room because his reputation is the waiting room. He had a handshake that meant something and eyes that didn't flinch. I sat across from his desk and said, I need to know if my family is stealing from me. And I need you to assume the answer is yes. Gordon didn't blink. Then let's find out. That was the beginning. The second call was to a private investigator named Pete Callahan. Pete worked out of a small office near Gillespie Park, drove a forgettable gray sedan, and carried 20 years of experience that showed in the way he listened. Completely still, no reactions, just absorbing everything like dry ground taking rain. I told him about the hospital. I told him about Bryce and the properties in Lakewood Ranch. I told him about Dean's I know where everything is. I told him about the sound of Renee's voice when she told a doctor not to bring me back. Pete wrote everything down. Then he looked up and asked one question. How long you been married? 30 years. Pete nodded slowly and wrote something down. I've wondered ever since what that something was. Week 3 is where it gets ugly. Gordon called me on a Thursday morning while Renee was at the gym. And hold that detail about the gym, because it's coming back. Dan, he said, I need you to come in, and I need you to be sitting down when I show you this. I drove myself for the first time since the accident. Took Bayshore Court to US 41, the same route I'd driven 1,000 times. parked behind Gordon's building, walked in. He had a folder on his desk roughly the thickness of a small novel. "Your VP of Operations," Gordon said, "has been moving money out of Whitfield Freight Solutions for approximately 3 years." The number was $500,000, $500,000, siphoned slowly and carefully through a combination of inflated vendor invoices, ghost expense accounts, and transfers routed through a shell company Dean had registered in Delaware under the name Alvarez Logistics LLC. Invisible, unless you knew to look. "He's your stepson?" Gordon asked. "Yes." His reasoning, and this is documented in internal messages our forensic accountant recovered, is that he was, quote, securing himself in case the will didn't include him, because he's not your biological son. I sat with that for a long moment. He did it because he was afraid I wouldn't take care of him. I had paid that man's rent when he was 24. I had promoted him over people with twice his experience. I had taken him to Buccaneers games, to client dinners, to the Keys for a fishing weekend in 2021. I had told him to his face more than once, "Your family, Dean. You never have to worry." And he robbed me anyway. "There's more," Gordon said. Of course there was. Renee co-signed on 11 of these transactions. She has signing authority on the business accounts. Some of these transfers could not have moved without her approval. Renee knew. My wife hadn't just stood at my hospital bed and told a doctor to let me go. For years she had been signing off while her son bled the company I built. Our family's company, one falsified invoice at a time. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I sat in Gordon Sutter's office off Fruitville Road and felt something I can only describe as a door closing. Quietly, firmly, click. "The properties," I said. "You mentioned properties on the phone. Tell me about the properties." Gordon opened another section of the folder. Months before my accident, Dean, with Renee helping at every step, had prepared a power of attorney document. Her signature on it was real. Mine was forged. The document sat in a drawer like a loaded gun, waiting. And the moment it looked like I wasn't leaving that ICU, he moved fast. He used the fake power of attorney to record a fraudulent quitclaim deed at the county clerk's office, adding his own name as co-owner on 2 titles, the Bayshore Courthouse and the Whitfield Freight Warehouse on the trail. "He moved within days of your crash," Gordon said. "He had this ready. He was waiting for the right moment." "Can we reverse it?" "Yes. Our documents examiner has already confirmed the signature on the power of attorney is a forgery. The handwriting analysis is airtight. I've prepared a lawsuit to freeze both properties and strip his name from the deeds entirely." He paused. "But Dan, the moment we file, Dean gets served. He'll know everything. Then we don't file yet." Gordon looked at me for a long second. "When?" I thought about something Renee had mentioned over dinner. The anniversary, 30 years. Everyone in the same backyard, all of them smiling at me across the patio. "Monday morning," I said, "after the party." Gordon nodded slowly. "So Dean walks into Saturday night believing he owns half your house." "That's exactly right." Pete Callahan called 2 days later. I was sitting on my back porch, watching the water in our little canal go nowhere, when the phone buzzed. "You want to know about the affair?" Pete said. "Tell me." "His name is Tyler Brooks, 34. Certified personal trainer at the Siesta Key Fitness Club. Your wife's been seeing him for 14 months. A pause. "I want to be straight with you about how I know that, because I've only been on this for 2 weeks. I didn't follow her for 14 months. Nobody can follow the past, but the paper trail can. Gym check-in records, her credit card statements, hotel folios from a place off University Parkway. Same hotel, Tuesday afternoons, going back 14 months like clockwork. Once I had the pattern on paper, I confirmed it in person twice. It's not casual, Dan. 14 months isn't casual." I did the math without meaning to. 14 months ago, Renee and I had gone to a New Year's Eve party at a neighbor's place in Siesta Cove. She'd worn a blue dress. We danced to something forgettable. She kissed me at midnight and said, "This is going to be a good year." 2 weeks later, she started training with Tyler Brooks. I put the phone down on the armrest and stared at the canal. 30 years, and not 30 bad years either. We had our challenges, our rough patches, like anyone, but we had good years. Real ones. I wasn't some checked-out husband who forgot her birthday and worked through Christmas. I worked hard, yes, probably harder than I should have. But I showed up. I paid for everything. I built the life she was now quietly distributing among her children and her gym instructor. I stared at the water. My hands were shaking. A cold, violent wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the porch railing to stay upright. I wanted to scream until my lungs burned. I wanted to walk inside and smash every plate in that kitchen. Instead, I forced my breath down. I closed my eyes until the shaking stopped. Because if I broke now, they wouldn't just get my money. They'd win. Keep moving, Daniel. There was one more piece I needed. I reached out to an employee named Dwayne Sutton. Dwayne was 44, sharp as a tack, and had worked in our accounts department for 6 years, right up until Bryce, in one of his rare exercises of actual authority, had him demoted over a personality conflict. Which is to say, Bryce didn't like being corrected, and Dwayne had the nerve to do it twice. Dwayne agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in the Rosemary district, downtown Sarasota. He showed up 5 minutes early, ordered a black coffee, and when I walked in, he looked at me like a man who had been waiting a very long time to have one specific conversation. I knew something was wrong with those vendor accounts, he said before I'd even sat down. I flagged it twice. Bryce told me I was overstepping. But it wasn't Bryce running it, it was Dean. He paused. And your daughter. I stopped, coffee cup halfway to my mouth. Paige, Dean was routing the cash through Alvarez Logistics, Dwayne said, sliding a thumb drive across the table. But look at the secondary payouts. Dean was cutting monthly checks straight to Paige's design boutique. It was hush money. She found out what her mother and Dean were doing about a year ago, and instead of telling you, she demanded a cut to keep her mouth shut. She's been funding her whole life with your stolen revenue. My daughter, the girl who used to fall asleep in the back seat on the way home from school, whose hair I could still picture against the car window in the late Florida light. She had discovered a knife in my back and, instead of pulling it out, negotiated a monthly fee to leave it in. Dwayne became my inside man over the next 10 days. He had records, personal backups he'd quietly kept, because Dwayne was exactly that kind of thorough, and they helped Gordon's team reconstruct the fraud timeline with surgical precision. Dates, amounts, approvals, the whole chain of custody on my own betrayal. Every transaction Dean moved and Renee approved, documented and cross-referenced. $500,000. 3 years, 43 separate transactions, all while I was driving home late from Tamiami Trail, believing I was building something for my family. I was. It turns out I was building it for them to take. By the end of week 4, here is what I had. Renee, an affair with Tyler Brooks, 14 months and counting, co-signer on 11 fraudulent transactions, a knowing participant in the forged power of attorney, and the woman who told a doctor that 58 was a full life, Dean, $500,000 stolen over 3 years, a forged power of attorney, his name fraudulently recorded on the deeds to my house and my warehouse, and the calm board meeting voice that told my family we should respect my imaginary wish to die. Paige. She didn't move the money, but she knew about all of it, and had been collecting a monthly kickback for over a year to stay silent, while telling a doctor her father had never been there for her. Bryce. He didn't know about the affair or the fraud, I'll give him that. But he sat in my ICU room talking about liquidity and Lakewood Ranch properties, told a physician his father didn't want to be a burden, and had been reading my private estate documents like a racing form. Gordon had the property lawsuit locked and loaded, sitting in a drawer ready to be filed Monday morning. Dean had no idea. As far as he was concerned, he co-owned my house and my warehouse, and I was home eating soup and watching television. Let him keep thinking that. He had about 6 days left to enjoy it. Meanwhile, I got my own affairs in order. I moved my money out of our joint personal savings account, $800,000 I had parked there over the years from my corporate distributions, and transferred every cent into an individual account at a different bank. Completely legal. My money, my signature, my name on every distribution that had built that balance in the first place. If Renee ever bothered to look, she'd find the account she never paid attention to sitting at zero. I also had a new will drawn up. The old one was generous, the new one was educational. And here's what I need you to understand about me. I'm not a vindictive man by nature. I'm a logistics guy. I like things organized, sequential, efficient. I like problems solved cleanly with minimum waste. What I was planning wasn't revenge in the Hollywood sense. It wasn't rage. It was logistics, and I had one final delivery to make. Our 30th wedding anniversary was 6 days out. Renee had already suggested, cheerfully, over dinner one night, while I smiled across the table at the woman who had signed my company's money over to her son, that we should do something special. Absolutely, I said. Let's invite everyone. Make it a real celebration. She smiled, reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. Every single one of them was going to be in the same backyard, and every single one of them was going to receive exactly what they had earned. Nobody throws a party for a dead man walking, but that is exactly what my family did. Renee planned the whole thing herself. Invitations went out to 14 neighbors from Siesta Cove, couples we'd known for years, the Hendersons from down the street, our pastor from Sarasota Community Church off Fruitville Road. She ordered catering from a place on Main Street downtown, the good stuff, not plastic trays from a grocery store. She rented tall cocktail tables with white linen. She bought a banner, 30 years, the Whitfield family. I saw it rolled up on the kitchen counter 3 days before the party, and stood there staring at it for a solid 10 seconds. The Whitfield family. Sure, let's celebrate that. The party was on a Saturday evening in late October, the kind of Sarasota night where the heat finally backs off around 7, and you can stand outside without feeling slowly cooked. Our backyard on Bayshore Court was strung with lights. The canal behind the house caught their reflection and turned the water into something that looked almost peaceful. Almost. Bryce showed up first, dressed like a man at a resort, which was Bryce's default setting. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Looking good, Dad. You really bounced back." "Feeling great," I said. "Best I've felt in years, honestly." He had no idea how true that was. Paige came in behind him, hugged her mother, and handed me a card. I opened it right there. Inside, she'd written, "Dad, so glad you're still here. Love you." I looked at her handwriting for a moment. I thought about a little girl who used to fall asleep in the car on the way home from school. I thought about where that girl went. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. Dean arrived last, because Dean always arrived last. He believed it made him look important. He wore a blazer. He shook my hand with both of his, the way he always did when he was performing warmth rather than feeling it, and said, 30 years, Dan. That's something. It really is, I said. Hey, I've got something for everyone tonight. A little gift. Dean smiled. Yeah, what kind of gift? The life-changing kind. He laughed like that was a joke. It wasn't. By 8 o'clock, the backyard was full. Neighbors laughing, glasses clinking. Renee moved through the crowd in a green dress, looking like a woman without a single secret in the world. Bryce was on his second bourbon. Paige was talking to someone near the canal. Dean was networking, actually networking at my anniversary party, because that is simply who he was. Gordon Sutter was parked on the street out front, sitting in his car with a folder on the passenger seat. Pete Callahan had made a phone call that afternoon on my behalf, and 2 Sarasota County Sheriff's deputies were waiting in an unmarked car 2 houses down. Everything was in position. I walked to the center of the patio, picked up a fork and tapped my glass. Can I get everyone's attention? The yard went quiet. Renee looked over and smiled, that warm public smile she wore like jewelry. Bryce raised his glass. Paige turned around. Dean crossed his arms and watched. 14 neighbors, my pastor, my family, an audience. Perfect. 30 years, I began. 30 years is a long time. You go through a lot together. You build something. You sacrifice. You make choices every day that you hope, that you trust, are worth it. People nodded. Someone said, "That's right. Nearly dying has a way of clarifying things," I continued. When I was lying in that hospital bed at Sarasota Memorial, I had nothing to do but listen, and think, and remember. Renee tilted her head slightly. The smile stayed, but something shifted behind her eyes. There it is. She just felt the temperature change. I heard things in that room that I will never forget. Things that changed me. And tonight, on our 30th anniversary, in front of everyone who has watched us build this life, I want to share what I learned. I reached down to the table beside me. 4 envelopes, each with a name written on the front in my own handwriting. The yard was completely silent now. Bryce, my son, stepped forward, bourbon still in hand, wearing the vague smile of a man expecting a check. I handed him his envelope. He opened it. He read. The smile didn't disappear all at once. It drained slowly like water leaving a bathtub. Inside was a printed transcript. Every word he'd said in that ICU room, the liquidity comment, the Lakewood Ranch properties. Once the estate clears, the trust starts paying out. I looked at the folder in his study. I know what my share is. Beneath the transcript sat a letter from Whitfield Freight Solutions, dated the previous Friday. Bryce, you're terminated from Whitfield Freight, effective immediately. Your corporate gas card is canceled as of midnight tonight. The lease on your car, the one the company's been covering, that's done too. I let it settle, and if you're wondering about the future, my new will leaves you exactly $1,000. Don't worry, you can use it for liquidity. The word landed exactly the way I intended it to, Dad. I'm not finished, Paige. She walked over slowly, arms already crossed. She took her envelope like it might bite her. Inside, the same transcript with her sections highlighted. He was never there for me. He was always working. Why should I rearrange my life? And beneath that, the thing I believe hit her harder than anything else. Forensic accounting records, 14 pages of them, showing 13 monthly transfers from Alvarez Logistics LLC to her design boutique. Hush money month after month in her own bank records. Paige looked at the pages, looked at me. Dad, I didn't mean. You meant every word, I said. And my voice was steady. And you knew about the money. You found out what they were doing to me, and instead of telling me, you set a price. I let that land. You knew, and you said nothing because silence paid better. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. My name comes off your apartment lease cosign as of Monday morning. You've got 30 days to find a new cosigner, a roommate, or a cheaper place to live. I paused. And same as your brother, $1,000 in the new will. Spend it wisely. Renee. The party was a photograph. Nobody moved. Nobody touched a drink. The Hendersons were staring at the ground like they were trying to sink into it. Our pastor looked like a man regretting every decision that had led him to this backyard. Renee set down her glass very carefully. She walked over and took her envelope with both hands, opened it. Inside, Pete Callahan's report. 14 months of dates, charges, and check-ins. Tyler Brooks, the Siesta Key Fitness Club, the hotel off University Parkway they used on Tuesday afternoons. While I was running the company, she was simultaneously helping her son Rob. Beneath that, the fraud documentation. Her signature on 11 fraudulent transactions. The forged power of attorney. Her real handwriting sitting next to mine, except mine was a forgery, and everyone in that yard was about to know it. And beneath all of that, divorce papers. Already drafted. Already filed with the court that Friday. She went pale, not red. Not tearful. Pale. The kind of pale that means the body is having a conversation with reality that the brain hasn't caught up to yet. 30 years, I said quietly. And you couldn't wait 7 days. Daniel, please. She glanced at the neighbors. At the banner over our heads. 30 years. The Whitfield family. You told a doctor I was 58, and that was a full life. You signed documents that helped move $500,000 out of the company I built. You helped put another man's name on my house while I was unconscious. I want to be clear, I never raised my voice once that entire night. I didn't need to. My lawyer filed the divorce petition on Friday. My settlement offer is the deed to that old duplex we bought out in Arcadia back in 2003. The one that needs a roof. You can take it and go quietly. Or you can go to court and let a judge spend his morning reading your fraud timeline out loud. Your choice. Renee Whitfield stood in her green dress. In the backyard she had decorated herself, surrounded by every person in her social world, and had absolutely nothing to say. Dean. He hadn't moved from his spot at the edge of the patio. He was very still. The blazer suddenly looked like a costume. I didn't hand Dean an envelope. I just looked at him. Your biological father couldn't be bothered to raise you, I said. He left your mother with sole custody and nothing to her name. I married her when you were a 6-year-old kid, and I gave you a real home, a father's love, and eventually the keys to my company. I promoted you, I lent you money, I called you son. My voice stayed level, but something underneath it could have cut glass. And for 3 years you stole from me $500,000, 43 transactions. You forged my signature on a power of attorney and put your name on my deeds while I was in a coma. And when I survived, you were annoyed. Dean's jaw tightened. Dan, whatever you think you have, I don't think anything. I know. Gordon Sutter filed a criminal complaint for grand theft, identity theft, and deed forgery with the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office yesterday morning. The warrant was signed at noon today. I looked toward the side of the house. Come on in. 2 deputies in plain clothes walked through the gate. The yard made a sound I can't fully describe, a collective intake of breath, like the whole party inhaling at once. Someone knocked over a glass. Bryce took a step backward, as if he could physically distance himself from what was happening. One of the deputies said, Dean Alvarez? Dean looked at me one last time. Something in his face cracked. Not remorse, not quite. More like the specific devastation of a man who had gambled everything on another man staying dead. "You loved me like a son," Dean said. Low, almost a whisper, but it never felt like it. "I did," I said. That part was real. They walked him out through the side gate. The backyard watched in total silence. Renee had her hand over her mouth. Bryce was staring at his shoes. Paige was crying. Real tears, finally, though I couldn't tell you exactly what they were for. I picked up my glass from the table and looked around at the neighbors. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," I said. "I mean that genuinely. Please, eat. The food's excellent." I picked the caterer myself, a few stunned faces. A pastor slowly reaching for a dinner roll because he did not know what else to do with his hands. As for me, I drained the glass and set it down clean. I'm 58 years old. I've got 30 good years left minimum. I've got a company still standing, and for the first time in a long time, not a single person in my life who doesn't deserve to be there. I buttoned my jacket, walked through the house, out the front door, and into the warm Sarasota night. My car was packed. It had been since Thursday. I pulled off Bayshore Court for the last time, turned onto US 41 and headed north. My phone buzzed once on the seat beside me. "Renee," I didn't answer. 3 minutes later, I pulled over, typed one text, and sent it. I heard every word. Then I put the phone in the glove box, rolled the windows down, and drove. It's been 8 months since that night, and people sometimes ask me, the few people I've told the whole story to, whether I regret doing it the way I did. In front of everyone, on the anniversary, with the deputies waiting behind the fence. I've thought about that question a lot, driving up and down the Gulf Coast in a car that finally feels quiet in the right way. And here is my honest answer. What I regret isn't the party. What I regret is all the years before it, when I mistook silence for peace and busyness for love. Because here's the truth I had nearly died to learn. You cannot buy your way into someone's heart, not with a company. Not with a lease cosign, or a promotion, or a $20,000 loan handed over with the words, "Family helps family." I spent 3 decades believing that providing was the same thing as connecting, that every late night at that office on Tamiami Trail was a deposit into an account of love that my family would someday honor. But love doesn't work like a trust fund. It doesn't mature, it doesn't pay out. It either lives in the daily choices people make when they think no one is watching, or it doesn't exist at all. And I learned something else in that hospital bed, in the dark, listening. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones people tell you. They're the ones you tell yourself year after year because the truth is inconvenient. Somewhere deep down, I had known Bryce never called unless he needed something. I had known Paige's warmth had a price tag. I had felt Renee drifting, the conversations getting shorter, the silences getting longer. I knew, I just filed it all away in a drawer marked "Later," the way busy men do. The coma didn't reveal strangers to me. It revealed the people they had always been, once my usefulness was subtracted from the equation. But I want to say this too, especially to anyone listening who has been betrayed by the people closest to them. What happened to me was not my fault, and what happened to you was not yours. Loving people generously is not a character flaw. Trusting your own family is not naivety. It is what family is supposed to be built on. The shame of betrayal belongs entirely to the ones who commit it, never to the ones who loved honestly. Don't let anyone, including your own inner voice at 3 in the morning, convince you otherwise. And one more thing, the hardest one. Justice and bitterness are not the same road, even though they start at the same intersection. I held every person in that backyard accountable, legally, financially, publicly. That was justice, and I don't apologize for a single envelope. But I refuse to let them keep living in my chest rent-free. Dean is awaiting trial. Renee took the duplex in Arcadia. Bryce is, I'm told, actually working for the first time in his life. Paige wrote me a letter last month, 6 pages, handwritten. I haven't decided yet whether to answer it. Maybe someday. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be for my sake, not theirs. That's another thing nearly dying teaches you. Your peace is the one asset nobody should ever be allowed to embezzle. These days I live in a smaller place up the coast near the water. I fish on Sundays. I sleep well. Whitfield Freight is thriving under a new operations chief, a sharp, honest man named Dwayne Sutton, who earned the job the old-fashioned way, by telling the truth when it cost him something. They wanted me dead. Instead, I gave them something far worse. The truth in front of everyone. They wanted the inheritance. They got exactly what they earned. If this story moved you, Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, and tell me honestly, what would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted them one by one, or all at once like I did? I read every comment, and your stories mean more to me than you know. I'll see you in the next one. This story was written, edited, and narrated with human hands and a human heart. Like many stories on this channel, it is inspired by the real experiences, letters, and confessions of ordinary people, with names, places, and identifying details changed to protect privacy. Betrayal, recovery, and hard-won peace are human experiences, and they deserve to be told by humans. Thank you for spending this time with me.